Are you being served? Made us laugh inside a harmless little department store, but what happened to the cast after the cameras stopped is far darker than anyone expected. Some died suddenly, and some changed so much you wouldn't recognize them today. Stay with us, because the truth behind these faces will shock you. Molly Sugden, as Mrs. Slocombe. Now we come to Molly Sugden, who played Mrs. Slocombe, the bold, sharp-tongued senior saleswoman whose voice and attitude could dominate an entire room. She was 50 years old when she became the driving comedic force of the show. More than comic relief, she carried many of the show's most iconic scenes with her timing and presence. Sadly, Molly Sugden passed away on July 1, 2009, at the age of 86, at the Royal Surrey County Hospital after suffering heart failure following a prolonged period of illness. In the years before her death, her health deteriorated steadily, limiting both her mobility and her ability to continue regular acting work. That decline became more severe after a major turning point in her personal life. When her husband, William Moore, died in 2000, the emotional impact was immediate and lasting. Even though she returned to television in projects like The Bill and appeared as herself in Little Britain, those appearances became less frequent as she struggled with ongoing health conditions and the effects of long-term treatment, including steroid use for inflammatory illness. By the time of her final public appearances, the contrast was unmistakable. She had to rely on medical support while dealing with chronic illness, and her last known appearance was at the funeral of her co-star, Wendy Richard, just months before her own death. Alongside that, she had already withdrawn from demanding roles like That's My Boy or My Husband and I, marking a clear shift from a career once built on constant visibility to a final stage defined by illness, personal loss, and reduced public presence. Frank Thornton as Captain Peacock. We come to Frank Thornton, who played Captain Peacock, the rigid, authoritative floor walker who controlled the entire department store with precision and pride. He was 51 years old when he became the symbol of order in Are You Being Served?, the man responsible for maintaining discipline among a staff constantly slipping into chaos. More than just a supervisor, his presence defined the structure of the show and anchored every storyline. As the years passed, his life reached a quiet but definitive end. Frank Thornton died on March 16, 2013, at the age of 92 in his home in London, passing away peacefully in his sleep. His career spanned decades, and even in later life he remained closely associated with his most famous roles, including Captain Peacock and Truly in Last of the Summer Wine. But long before that final chapter, a different struggle had already shaped his life. After the success of Are You Being Served?, Frank continued working in projects like Carry On Screaming and stage productions such as Me and My Girl, yet casting directors repeatedly placed him into the same category: the formal, emotionally reserved gentleman. This consistent typecasting limited his opportunities to explore more complex or vulnerable characters, narrowing the range of roles available to him despite his proven ability. And while his professional path was constrained in that way, his personal life followed a strikingly different pattern. He married actress Beryl Evans in 1945, and their relationship lasted until his death, spanning nearly 7 decades. In an industry often marked by instability, that long marriage stood in contrast to the rigid characters he portrayed, revealing a man whose real life was built on consistency, loyalty, and endurance rather than the limitations imposed on his career. Trevor Bannister as Mr. Lucas. Now we come to Trevor Bannister, who played Mr. Lucas, the cheeky, flirtatious salesman who brought youth, sarcasm, and mischief into the department store. He was 38 years old when he made this fast-talking troublemaker one of the liveliest figures in Are You Being Served?, always ready with a smirk or a sly remark. His role gave the show a sharper edge, because Mr. Lucas was often the one puncturing the pomposity around him. However, his life ended suddenly. Trevor Bannister died on April 14, 2011, at the age of 76, after suffering a heart attack while working in his garage at his allotment in Thames Ditton, Surrey. The shock was even harder for those around him because his death came without a long public decline, cutting short a career that had stretched across stage, television, and comedy, for decades. But the real twist in his story came much earlier, when he walked away from Are You Being Served, while it was still hugely successful. He left because the filming schedule clashed with his long theater tours, making him sense professionally at the time, but haunted him later when his screen career never rose to the level many expected. He kept working in productions like Last of the Summer Wine, Coronation Street, and New Tricks, yet the momentum he had during his years as Mr. Lucas was never fully recovered. And behind that professional frustration was a private life that had also seen its share of change. His first marriage to actress Kathleen Kravos ended in divorce after they had 3 sons, and although he later remarried Pamela Carson in 1982, the sense of a career diverted at its peak never completely disappeared from his story. With an estimated net worth of around $1 million, Trevor Bannister remained a respected performer, but his later years carried the unmistakable feeling of a man who had stepped away from one defining success and never stopped paying for it. John Inman as Mr. Humphreys. We come to John Inman, who played Mr. Humphreys, the flamboyant salesman with a signature voice and unforgettable mannerisms. He was 37 years old when he turned a small retail assistant into the most attention-grabbing figure in Are You Being Served, delivering lines and reactions that instantly stood out. With just a few words and gestures, he created moments that audiences could immediately recognize and repeat. Sadly, John Inman passed away on March 8, 2007, at the age of 71, at St. Mary's Hospital in London due to a severe infection following complications from hepatitis A. His body was later cremated at Golders Green after a funeral attended by close friends and colleagues. But long before his death, his life had already been shaped by pressure and controversy. His portrayal of Mr. Humphreys brought him massive fame, awards, and recognition, including being named BBC TV Personality of the Year in 1976. At the same time, it triggered backlash from activist groups who accused the character of reinforcing harmful stereotypes, placing him under constant public scrutiny. Despite that, he continued to perform in stage productions like Bedside Manners and returned to the role in Grace and Favour, even carrying the character into the Australian version of the show, refusing to abandon the role that defined him. And while his career remained active, his health steadily declined. He collapsed on stage in 1995, was hospitalized multiple times for breathing problems, and later suffered a serious hepatitis A infection that forced him to cancel performances. After more than 30 years together, he married his partner Ron Lynch in 2005, just 2 years before his death, leaving behind an estate worth over £2.8 million. It was a life defined by visibility, pressure, and physical decline, ending only after years of pushing through illness. Wendy Richard as Miss Brahms. Now we come to Wendy Richard, who played Miss Brahms, the sharp-tongued shop assistant with a bold Cockney voice and a direct attitude. She was 29 years old when she brought a grounded, working-class energy into Are You Being Served, delivering lines with speed, edge, and confidence. Her presence added a different rhythm to the shop floor, often cutting through the chaos with blunt honesty. Tragically, Wendy Richard passed away on February 26, 2009, at the age of 65 in a London clinic after breast cancer spread aggressively through her body, reaching her bones and kidneys. Her funeral was held in London with many figures from the television industry in attendance, and she was later cremated in a private ceremony. But her personal life had been unstable long before her illness. She went through 4 marriages, with one relationship marked by control and financial exploitation, leaving lasting emotional damage. Even as she built a powerful second career in EastEnders, where she played Pauline Fowler for over 2 decades, her private life remained turbulent, forcing her to balance public success with repeated personal breakdowns. And then came the final battle that changed everything. Diagnosed with breast cancer in 1996, she fought through treatment, only for the disease to return in 2002 and again in 2008, this time spreading rapidly. Despite the pain, she filmed the documentary Wendy Richard, To Tell You the Truth, openly documenting her final months. Her last acting role in Agatha Christie's Marple aired after her death, closing a career that had spanned decades. With an estimated net worth of around $3 million, her story ended not with stability, but with a prolonged fight against illness that ultimately consumed her life. Nicholas Smith as Mr. Rumbold. We come to Nicholas Smith, who played Mr. Rumbold, the pompous, balding manager whose authority was constantly undermined by his own confusion. He was 38 years old when he turned this blustering superior into one of the show's most reliable sources of tension and embarrassment in Are You Being Served? His role gave the shop its ridiculous sense of hierarchy, because every order Mr. Rumbold gave seemed to create even more disorder. Tragically, Nicholas Smith died on December 6, 2015, at the age of 81, after spending 7 weeks in hospital with a head injury caused by a fall at his home in Sutton, London. By then, he had become the last surviving member of the show's original staff cast, which made his death feel like the final closing chapter of that era. But after the sitcom faded, the struggle became more practical and more cruel. His face, voice, and comic style were so strongly tied to Mr. Rumbold that many directors hesitated to cast him in substantially different parts, making it difficult for him to maintain the same level of income. He kept working in projects like Z-Cars, Wurzel Gummidge, and later Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, where his voice performance earned attention, but those jobs never fully replaced the security that his most famous role had once given him. And that is what makes his story sting a little more. He was not just an actor losing visibility, he was also a trained singer, musician, and writer, with talents far beyond the role that trapped him. Even so, he spent years living under the shadow of one character while trying to keep his career moving. With an estimated net worth of around $1.2 million, Nicholas Smith left behind a respected body of work, but also the clear mark of a man whose distinctive image helped make him famous and later made it harder for him to move on. Arthur Brough as Mr. Granger. We come to Arthur Brough, who played Mr. Granger, the elderly, forgetful senior salesman whose slow reactions often turned simple situations into awkward confusion. He was 67 years old when he became the aging presence of Are You Being Served, bringing a worn-out, old-school energy that clashed with the chaos around him. His character added actors and keeping stage productions alive across England. Even as he transitioned into television later in life, appearing in shows like Upstairs, Downstairs, and Dad's Army, his identity remained tied to theater, a world he saw slowly fading. When his wife fell seriously ill, their theater closed, and that loss quietly reshaped his later years. And when she finally passed away in 1978, everything collapsed at once. He had already spoken about stepping away from acting, unable to continue without her, and within weeks, his own life ended. With an estimated net worth of around $500,000, Arthur Brough left behind more than performances. He left a legacy built on decades of theater, but also a story defined by a final loss that came too quickly for him to endure. Harold Bennett as young Mr. Grace. Now we come to Harold Bennett, who played young Mr. Grace, the aging, eccentric owner whose decisions often defied logic but controlled everything from the top. He was 73 years old when he brought this frail yet powerful figure into Are You Being Served, creating a character that felt both distant and strangely unpredictable. His appearances carried a sense of authority that didn't need to be loud to be effective. However, his life ended suddenly. Harold Bennett died on September 11, 1981, at the age of 82 after suffering a heart attack. His final appearance in the show aired only months after his death, closing his on-screen presence shortly after he was gone. But his path to that role had been anything but easy. He left school at just 12 years old, worked various jobs including performing as a circus clown and serving during World War I, before eventually building a life in theater. What makes his story unusual is that he stepped away from acting for years, working as a technical draftsman, only returning to performance after retirement, an age when most careers had already ended. He later appeared in projects like Dad's Army and stage productions with the Royal Shakespeare Company, proving that his second career was not a minor comeback, but a serious return. And that late success came with its own quiet weight. His wife had died decades earlier, leaving him to raise their children while rebuilding his career alone. By the time he gained recognition on television, he had already lived through hardship, war, and personal loss. With an estimated net worth of around $300,000, Harold Bennett's story stands out not for sudden tragedy, but for a lifetime of resilience that only found its reward near the very end. Arthur English as Mr. Harmon. Arthur English stepped into Are You Being Served? As Mr. Harmon, the blunt and often irritable maintenance man whose presence disrupted the polished illusion of the store. He was 53 years old when he joined the series, bringing with him the timing and sharp delivery of a seasoned musical comedy performer. His character didn't try to charm. He interrupted, complained, and exposed the cracks behind the scenes. He passed away on April 16, 1995, at the age of 75, after years of suffering from severe emphysema caused by long-term smoking. In his final years, he lived in a nursing home in Farnborough, where his health steadily declined before complications from the illness ultimately took his life. Long before television, his career had been built through persistence rather than instant success. After serving in World War II, he worked as a painter and decorator during the day while performing comedy routines at night, slowly shaping his identity as a stage entertainer. His breakthrough came at the Windmill Theater, where his fast-talking, spiv persona earned him recognition, eventually leading to television roles in shows like Follyfoot and The Ghosts of Motley Hall. But behind that rising career, personal loss hit hard. His first wife died in 1975, and in the aftermath, he turned increasingly to alcohol, a shift that affected both his personal life and stability. That pattern of instability continued into his later years. His second marriage to a much younger dancer ended in separation and divorce, leaving him increasingly isolated as his health worsened. Even as he continued working in projects like In Sickness and In Health, his physical condition limited him more each year. With an estimated net worth of around $800,000, Arthur English left behind a career that began with laughter, but ended under the weight of illness, loss, and a body that could no longer keep up. James Hayter as Mr. Tebbs. James Hayter appeared in Are You Being Served? As Mr. Tebbs, stepping in as the senior salesman after Arthur Brough's passing. He was already 71 years old when he took on the role in 1978, bringing a calm, authoritative presence shaped by decades of stage and film experience. His performance carried a quiet confidence that reflected a lifetime in the industry. He died on March 27, 1983, at the age of 75 while living in Spain, with reports stating natural causes. His final years were spent away from the spotlight, far removed from the British television audience that had once recognized him so easily. But his departure from the show revealed a different kind of struggle, one driven by financial reality rather than artistic choice. At a stage in life when most actors faced declining opportunities, he accepted a lucrative deal to become the voice of Mr. Kipling cake advertisements. That decision forced him to leave the series early, creating tension with producers and leading to a situation where commercial commitments overruled a stable television role. It was not a scandal, but it exposed the pressure even experienced actors faced when balancing income and career late in life. And that tension followed him quietly into his final years. Despite earlier success in films like The Story of Robin Hood and His Merry Men and The Pickwick Papers, where he even earned a BAFTA nomination, his later career became more fragmented. The choice to prioritize financial security over long-term roles reflected a reality many veteran actors rarely spoke about. With an estimated net worth of around $600,000, James Hayter's story is less about decline and more about the difficult decisions that come when time, health, and opportunity no longer move in the same direction. Alfie Bass as Mr. Goldberg. Alfie Bass appeared in Are You Being Served? As Mr. Goldberg, stepping into the role of senior salesman after others had already come and gone. He was 63 years old in 1979, bringing a grounded, streetwise presence shaped by decades of experience in film and theater. His performance carried a quiet warmth, often reflecting the working-class roots he never tried to hide. He died suddenly on July 16, 1987, at the age of 71 after suffering a heart attack. His passing came without warning, ending a career that had stretched across stage, film, television, and radio for nearly 5 decades. But long before recognition, his life had been defined by struggle. Born into a poor Jewish immigrant family in London's East End, the youngest of 10 children, he left school early and worked as a carpenter to survive. During World War II, he was rejected by the Royal Air Force and instead served in other roles while continuing to perform whenever he could. That persistence eventually led him to stage success at the Unity Theatre and later to films like Alfie, 1966, and The Fearless Vampire Killers, 1967, where he proved he could move between comedy and drama without losing authenticity. And even as his career stabilized, he never escaped the weight of his beginnings. He often played characters rooted in hardship, mirroring the life he had lived while continuing to work steadily into the 1980s with roles in series like Minder. With an estimated net worth of around $700,000, Alfie Bass left behind a career built not on privilege or luck, but on endurance, one that ended as abruptly as it had once begun in struggle. Larry Martyn as Mr. Mash. Larry Martyn took on the role of Mr. Mash, the original maintenance man in Are You Being Served, bringing a clumsy, comedic energy that contrasted with the rigid structure of the store. He was just 38 years old when he joined the show in 1972, making him one of the younger faces among a cast dominated by older performers. His character added movement and unpredictability, often turning routine moments into physical comedy. He died on August 7, 1994, at the age of 60 at his home in Kent. An inquest into his death returned an open verdict, meaning the exact cause could not be determined, though reports often associated it with heart-related issues. His career, however, never followed a stable path. Before acting, he worked as a circus performer and even served in the parachute regiment, experiences that shaped his physical style on screen. Yet despite appearing in popular shows like On the Buses, Rising Damp, and films such as Carry On at Your Convenience, he was rarely given leading roles. Even his time on Are You Being Served was cut short when he left after 3 seasons due to commitments to another series, a decision that disrupted what could have been his most